Kabul airport in Afghanistan, where crowds were gathered in the hope of getting on to one of the last flights to escape Taliban rule. Taliban officials said at least 13 people were killed, and it comes after days of warnings from Western intelligence agencies that an attack at the airport could be imminent. Well, let me bring you right up to date in terms of what we know so far, because the spokesperson for the US Secretary of Defense has called it a complex attack that resulted in a number of American and Afghan casualties. Kabul's emergency hospital says 60 injured people have been taken there so far. The Pentagon has also confirmed at least 2 explosions which happened close to one another outside the perimeter of the airport. One blast happened close to the airport's Abbey Gate and the other close to the nearby Baron Hotel. The hotel had been used by some Western nations as a staging point for evacuations since the airlift began. Well, our Afghan correspondent Secunda Kamani gave us this update in the last hour.
Details still emerging on this, but from what we understand, there was at least one explosion, as you say, close to the Abbey Gate entrance to the airport. Both British and American, as well as other international troops, have been stationed there. Large crowds of desperate Afghans had also been there trying to get inside the airport. Now, also getting reports that there was a second explosion close by, close to the secure compound where those being evacuated by the British embassy were being taken to. All suggestions at the moment that this attack was carried out by the Islamic State group. Western security services had warned all day about the possibility of an attack by IS, saying one was imminent. The group is much less powerful than the Taliban here in Afghanistan, but it has a history of carrying out devastating, horrific attacks, often on very soft targets, and this would have been a pretty soft target because of the chaos around the airport. Taliban forces have been there at times, checking some people's documents, filtering them into different queues, but every time I've been there, I've never seen people being patted down and searched. Even if they were patted down and searched, of course, by the time that a suicide bomber reaches that point, then it's too late, really, to prevent horrific casualties. Some video being shared online showing piles and piles of dead bodies, so expect those casualty figures to rise, unfortunately.
Secunda, as you're speaking, we're seeing some of the still images from the area with casualties being taken away. Obviously, the situation is still very, very fluid with information coming in, but what are you hearing about casualty numbers?
Well, it's difficult at the moment, partly because we're in a state of flux right now. So we still have a serving government health minister from the previous government, but obviously we have a new government, or we don't have a new government, but the Taliban are in charge. So information is not coming out in the way that it previously would have come out. But from what we're understanding from US sources, a number of US soldiers had been injured. Reports of around 3 US soldiers being injured. A local media saying that 13 people were killed in total. I expect the vast majority of those victims to be ordinary Afghans. That's so often the case, been so often the case throughout this horrendous conflict, of course.
And Secunda, I heard you reporting earlier in the day when, of course, those intelligence reports were warning of an imminent attack, and you were making the point that that information, despite it being known, it simply didn't cut through in terms of the numbers of desperate people there at the airport who were still coming, who were still staying.
That's exactly right. I mean, so many people who are there, and we're talking about thousands, are in such a state of confusion, such a state of desperation, that one, they're not going to be hearing this kind of information. They're not going to be receiving that. They're hearing all kinds of other rumors. They're just trying to focus on getting out of the country. The other thing is that they've endured so much already to get to this point. Many have camped out for days in dire conditions. So what may have seemed to them as a vague or possible hypothetical threat earlier in the day would not have been enough to put them off from going to the airport. There would have been large crowds there still. All the reports that I'm getting indicate there was a large crowd at the time of this explosion.